Good morning to whoever's here so far. We can start in another 2 minutes. Okay, welcome everyone and thank you for our webinar on Pune Air Quality and Health Impact. I'm Sharmila from Parisar and I have with me my colleagues Shweta and Ranjit co-hosting this session. Before we begin, we share that this year Parisar has entered its 40th year on the 5th of June. Parisar's vision has been to make cities accessible and livable spaces, and since its inception, been engaging with issues of environment, heritage, road safety, street design, and sustainable transportation, among others. While working on air quality, we are keen on seeing the implementation of the City Action Plan, which is mandated under the National Clean Air Program, and are following up closely with the PMC on this issue. In the past 2 years, we have carried out petitions with various demands leading to mitigation of air pollution. We have conducted two studies. The first one was a Pune Air Quality Perception Survey done in collaboration with the Center for Environment Education. This one, comparative study, where we have looked at the 6 smart cities in Maharashtra which do not meet the air quality standards prescribed by the Central Pollution Control Board, to see how they have fared in carrying out the action they have proposed to improve the air quality in those cities. We would be bringing out a report on this study shortly. We are also a part of national and state networks working for clean air. But as while working on any civic issue, until there is a strong public demand, it is difficult to bring any kind of change. And unless the citizens know how something is impacting them, their concern or engagement with the issue remains limited. Therefore, This series of talks is an attempt to raise an awareness on the different aspects of air pollution. While we plan to cover topics like monitoring of air quality, the city action plan and its implementation, and other aspects in the near future, today's session is focused on how air pollution impacts our health every day. Just to share some figures, as per the World Health Organization, the air pollution causes 4.2 million deaths every year, and out of those, 1.2 million are from India alone. And we're talking only of fatality, millions more who suffer by air pollution. In a study done by Greenpeace Southeast Asia, air pollution costs India a staggering 3.40 lakh rupees per second, equating to an annual economic loss of 10.7 lakh crores. Now, while talking of Pune, all of us have experienced how the air pollution had dropped during the lockdown. In a quick online survey that we had done on the World Environment Day, 5th of June, we had asked respondents noticed any changes they could link to the air quality. 40% said that they experienced fewer instances of sore throat, coughs, allergies, and asthmatic attacks. 30% said that they felt more energetic owing to a freshness in the air. So just in a short span of 2 months, if we could see and feel the changes, we can get a sense of just how much our health and well-being is associated with the air that we breathe. So with this, I invite our first speaker, Dr. Sandeep, to share his presentation and thoughts with us. Dr. Salvi is the director of Pulmocare Research and Education Foundation based in Pune. He's a chest physician by training and has been researching on the effects of air pollution on human health for the past 30 years. He has done some pioneering work on air pollution generated during Diwali and has researched in depth the effects of burning of mosquito coils and dhoop sticks. Just a couple of logistical points. After Dr. Salvi is done with his presentation, Shweta will introduce our second panelist, Dr. Ritu Parchure, who is going to speak about the very important aspect of health risk communication, after which we will open up questions for both the speakers. If at any point in the session you have a question, you could type it in the question and answer section. You also have the raise hand option. So if you click on that, then we can enable you to ask your questions after the presentations. So Dr. Salvi, I request you to begin with your presentation, please.
Thank you, Sharmila. Just wanted to check if you can see my presentation. Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to check if you can see my presentation.
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. So wish you all a very good morning. And thank you, Sharmila, for the very kind words of introduction. I also would like to thank Parisar for organizing this today's meet on air pollution. And I look forward to interacting with you all. I bring to you greetings from my institute called the Pulmocare Research and Education Foundation, situated in our own city in Pune, in Viman Nagar, where we have been doing a lot of work on the health effects of air pollution. So what I'm going to be covering over the next 15 to 20 minutes is to share with you some of the insights on the importance of the air that we breathe and what are the health impacts of breathing polluted air. The first thing that you do when you're born is you take your first breath. And the last thing that you do before you die is you take your last breath. Life is a period that is defined between these two breaths. Isn't that fascinating? Life is defined as breathing from your first breath to your last breath. In fact, even when you're growing inside your mother's womb, it is still not defined as life, because life starts with the first breath. It is important for us to breathe. The lungs are the organ that nourish our body with oxygen. On a daily basis, each one of us requires around 1,000 liters of pure oxygen for all these cells in the body to function properly. And for this, we have to breathe about 10,000 liters of air. So the 10,000 liters of air that we breathe go into the lungs, and the lungs then extract the 1,000 liters of oxygen and then pass it on to a protein called hemoglobin, or HB, called HB, which is present inside these red blood cells. You can see the red blood cells over here are disc shaped, and each of these red blood cell has around 300 million hemoglobin molecules. And the whole job of the hemoglobin molecule is to hold on to oxygen that the lungs have just delivered, and then to transport it to the different organs of the body or the different tissues of the body, and then releases that oxygen so that they can use it for energy production. If you count every single cell in the body, right from the tip of your hair till the tip of your toe, there are about 37 trillion cells. Trillion is with a T. Out of these 37 trillion cells, 25 trillion are the red blood cells that are circulating in the blood, whose job is only to transport oxygen, that 1,000 liters that we have extracted from the lungs, to transport that to all the tissues of the body. Look at the amount of investment that the human body has made in order to extract the oxygen and to transport it to all the other parts of the body. If you take 100 milliliters of blood from your vein and just put it in a test tube, after some time, then the red blood cells settle at the bottom, as you can see here, about 45 to 50% of the volume of the blood. And that is the portion of the blood that is actually transporting oxygen to all parts of the body. So that is how important oxygen is for us. In fact, oxygen is life. Oxygen is present in the water molecule. The water that we drink has hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen is also a very important component of all carbohydrates. So you can see the O over there, which is oxygen. It is also an important component of all proteins and also an important component of all fats. You have to have oxygen if you have to make proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and obviously water as well. So oxygen is necessary for all the basic essential things of life. In fact, this is very fascinating. Perhaps many of you all may not be knowing this. 65% of your body weight is accounted for by oxygen. So if you're, say, 50 kilograms, if you weigh 50 kilograms, then about 35 kilograms of your body weight is only because of the oxygen that is present in your body. Obviously, most of it is because of water, but clearly there is a lot of oxygen that the human body requires to sustain itself. A few years ago, I asked this question to my young daughter who was going to school, so primary school. I asked a very simple question. What does a car run on? And if I ask the same question to you, the answer would obviously be very simple. A car runs on petrol or diesel. Really? Is there anything else that it needs so that it can burn this to produce energy? And then you start thinking, oh, petrol and diesel needs to be burned or combusted. And for that combustion, you need to have presence of oxygen. If you have no oxygen, then this petrol and diesel have absolutely no value at all. So I was very inquisitive to understand that if you burn 1 liter of petrol or if you burn 1 liter of diesel, how much oxygen does it require for it to have this combustion? And I typed this question in the Google, and in the first 5 pages of Google, I could not find the answer. So I could not find the answer anywhere, probably because nobody even asked this question. I was very inquisitive to find an answer for that. So I went to all the mechanical engineering books and looked at how an engine works and how much air and how much oxygen, petrol and fuel is used. And to cut the long story short, 1 liter of petrol requires 1,700 liters of pure oxygen. And we know that oxygen is present in the air in a concentration of around 21%. So you need about 8,500 liters of air, which contains 1,700 liters of oxygen to combust the petrol and the diesel. The reason why I'm showing you this information is because we have to pay money for the petrol and the diesel that we buy. We have value for it. But because oxygen is available for us for free, we don't even bother about it. We have no value for it. We don't even consider it as an important substance that is important for driving the motor vehicle. So I said, what if I give a cost to the oxygen? If I'm going to charge petrol, I'm going to charge oxygen as well. So I went to the Amazon website and typed in cost of oxygen cylinder. And there I found that it costs about 30 rupees per liter. 1,700 liters of oxygen is required to burn 1 liter of fuel. 1 liter of oxygen costs 30 rupees. So about 50,000 rupees is required to burn that 1 liter of petrol or diesel. The point is, you have value for the petrol and diesel because you pay money. You have no value for the air or the oxygen that is freely available for us. It is important to realize that oxygen generates 90% of the body's energy. This is so important, 90%. Only 10% of the energy comes from the food that we eat and the water that we drink. So the air that we breathe that nourishes our body with oxygen produces 90% of the body's energy. Just some very interesting questions that you may find of interest. Who produces oxygen for planet Earth? You know, everybody is breathing in oxygen. There are 7-8 billion people. Motor vehicles are using it. Animals are using it. So does the level of oxygen on the Earth go down, 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 down? No, somebody is always constantly producing this for us. Who produces oxygen for the planet Earth? And I'm sure most of you would give this answer. The trees, and the greenery. Yes, you're correct, but you're correct only 30%. 70% of the oxygen does not come from the trees and the green plants. It comes from something else. And do you know what it is? It comes from the water bodies. The green algae and the cyanobacteria that are present in the oceans and the seas and the lakes, they are the ones that produce 70% of the Earth's oxygen. Isn't that fascinating? 70% of the oxygen comes from the water bodies and 30% comes from the vegetation and the trees and the plants on the surface of this Earth. Which plants produce the most amount of oxygen? Can you give that answer in your mind itself? If you do not know the answer, here it is. Sugarcane. Sugarcane is a plant that produces the most amount of oxygen. So if you want to breathe a lot of oxygen, you should go and stay in a sugarcane farm. Then the second one is maize, and the third one is green grass. They're the ones that produce the most amount of oxygen. Pure air is something that we don't even know what is the definition of pure air. And only if you ask the school students, what is the definition of pure air? Then they'll go and look up in their books and they'll tell you what the answer is. So pure air is 78%, nitrogen 21%, oxygen 0.9%, argon 0.04%, carbon dioxide, and a little bit of water vapor that together combines together what we call as pure air. But in the real world that we live, hardly anybody of us breathes the real pure air. We breathe air that is mixed with all the air pollutants, with dust, bacteria, viruses, fungi, pollen, everything. So it's a mixture of everything that we are breathing on a daily basis. But there are two essential components of air pollutants that we must be aware of. We have the gaseous pollutants, the gas-like substances, which comprises of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and ozone. And then you have the particulate matter pollution. These are very, very tiny particles that have the ability to enter deeper into the deeper portions of the lung. So you have the PM10, which are 10 microns in diameter or less, or PM2.5, which are 2.5 microns in diameter or less. So these are the air pollutants. And then they are further classified as AAP, which is not the Aam Aadmi Party. It represents ambient air pollution, that is pollution outside your house. And then you have HAP, or household air pollution. It used to be called as household air pollution, but now it's expanded to called indoor air pollution, because it's just not the house that produces pollution, but even your office buildings, your school spaces also produce a lot of pollution indoors. So that's why the term is now called indoor air pollution. And then finally, occupation that you experience at workplaces is called occupational air pollution. So the AAP, or the ambient air pollution, these are the sources that I have got from Pune city. One of the major sources is the exhaust from motor vehicles. Then you have the road dust. Then you have the industries. Then you have crop burning, dust, garbage burning. and then dried leaves burning. These are all very, very important sources of ambient air pollution in our own Pune city. If you look at the household air pollution, in the city, not many people use biomass fuel for cooking, but in the outskirts of Pune, a lot of people, in fact, 65% of India's population still use biomass fuel for cooking. And the smoke that is produced by the burning of wood, animal dung, or crop residues is actually very harmful for the human body. And so that's a source that we generate from inside our homes. Burning one mosquito coil in the night for a period of 6 hours, when you keep the doors and the windows closed, produces as much amount of pollution that is equal to smoking 100 cigarettes. One mosquito coil, one night is equal to smoking 100 cigarettes. So this is a bigger source of air pollution than the motor vehicles and the industries that we talk about, but nobody knows about it. The dhoop stick is even worse. In fact, a small dhoop stick of 4 centimeters, it burns only for 15 minutes. But during those 15 minutes, it produces as much amount of air pollution that is equal to 500 cigarettes. One mosquito coil is 100 cigarettes. One small dhoop stick is 500 cigarettes. And this is all the research that we did at our institute. We also measured the levels of air pollution during the Diwali festival. And this is all work done in Pune city. The snake tablet is the worst. That one snake tablet that you burn produces as much amount of pollution that is equal to 2,900 cigarettes. The smoke that comes from 2,900 cigarettes. Then the garland, that 1,000 ka lad jo hai, when we burn that, it produces PM 2.5, which is equal to 1,750 cigarettes. And then the pulpul is 1,300 cigarettes, and the fuljhadi is around 470 cigarettes. So we produce extremely high levels of air pollution during the Diwali festival. So the numbers that I've showed you is of individual firecrackers. So imagine that so many people in Pune are burning it all at the same time. What impact will that have? Not only on your personal exposure levels, but on the levels of the air pollution in the city of Pune. The harmful effects of air pollution start even before you are born. This is a study that was conducted in the city of New York. So when a baby is born, the first thing that you do is you cut the umbilical cord. After the umbilical cord is cut, you remove the blood from the umbilical cord and you send it to the laboratory to find out, are there any circulating air pollutants that were present in this blood that was entering into the growing fetus. 10 randomly selected newborn babies were selected in New York City, and the blood was sent for examination to find out how many pollutants were there. And the answer was shocking. 287 different types of air pollutants were identified in the umbilical cord blood of babies born in the city of New York. Isn't that shameful? If this is what happens in the city of New York, you can only imagine what must be happening in our own cities in India, where the mother is being exposed to all the air pollutants. It is entering into her blood circulation, and from the blood circulation, it is entering into the growing fetus. And that's the time when the growing fetus starts getting exposed to different types of air pollutants, even before they're born. A very interesting study was conducted in Japan. So these are the houses over here, which are right next to the main road. So if you have a house right next to the main road or within 50 meters from the main road, or if you have a house which is more than 200 meters from the main road. So there were pregnant ladies who were living inside these two areas. The babies were born to them, and these babies were followed over a period of 2 to 3 years. The research question that they wanted to find out was, babies who were born to mothers who resided less than 50 meters from the main road versus babies who were born to mothers that resided more than 200 meters from the main road, is there a difference in the amount of asthma or allergies present in these children? And the answer was shocking. If you live right next to the main road or less than 50 meters, the chances of you developing asthma is 4 times more. 4 times more is 400% greater risk of having asthma as compared to if you live more than 200 meters from the main road. And the same thing for eczema, which is an allergic skin rash. So if you live next to the main road, you're more likely to develop allergic diseases such as asthma and eczema. The children are the ones who are the most vulnerable population to air pollution. On the right hand side over here, you can see this graph where this x-axis is age in years. So 10, 20, 30, 40 is years. On the y-axis is your lung function value. Let's call it as lung function. So as you grow up to the age of around 30, your lung function grows. As you can see the green line over here. After the age of 30, there is a slow decline in your lung function capacity as you age. And this is normal aging pattern. What I want you to see is the red line, which is below that. This is the red line that depicts what happens in children born in India. Because they're exposed to air pollution at an early age, they do not reach the height that they're expected to. And then the decline in lung function occurs equal to what happens in the Western world. So we Indians are born with smaller lungs than the people who are born in the Western world, purely because we breathe polluted air. And this has been reported quite a few times in a big paper published in The Lancet that suggested that Indians have lungs that are 35% weaker than the Western or the Caucasian world. A normal healthy lung looks light pink, as you can see on the left-hand side over here. And on the right-hand side is the black lung that you see when people are exposed to high levels of air pollution. So whatever pollution you breathe, your lungs hold it permanently, and your lungs actually become blacker and blacker with time, depending on how much air pollution you breathe. One of the major impacts of air pollution is on the heart. And here you can see I've drawn bars over here to represent what is the risk of developing a heart attack in an individual who is more than 65 years of age, at a risk of having a heart disease. If the person is 65 years of age or older, and if he's a smoker, on the left-hand side, you can see the yellow bar, the risk of him having a heart attack is 2.5 times more as compared to somebody who does not smoke. So if you smoke, the risk of you having a heart attack is 2.5 times more. If you do not do any physical activity, you just sit at home, 1.5 times more risk of having a heart attack. Diabetes is more than 1.5 times. Angry personality is 3. High cholesterol is 3.5. And look at the last column in red. Spending 1 hour in the traffic, inhaling all that pollution is equal to developing a risk of more than 3.5 times of having a heart attack than all the other risks that we have known so far. So if you have high blood cholesterol, we know that blood cholesterol ko kam kar do, nahi to heart attack ho jayega. But what about that 1 hour spending in the traffic? That exposes you to a greater risk of having a heart attack than even your high cholesterol levels. So this is a summary slide that tells you what is the impact of air pollution on the health. So I talked about the impact on the growing fetus, lungs, you have infections, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and lung cancer. These are all the things that the lungs get affected because of air pollution. The effect on the heart is you have high blood pressure or hypertension, ischemic heart disease, or what we call as coronary heart disease, heart failure. The 3 important diseases that occur in the heart because of air pollution. Vascular is your blood circulation, is a stroke, so you get paralytic attacks. Then endocrine is obesity, diabetes is all associated with air pollution. And brain, it has been shown that your ability to, for cognition, depression, and Alzheimer's is significantly increased when you reside in a polluted area. Just because we are in the COVID pandemic, I just thought of putting this one slide, a very nice study from Italy. There are 2 maps over here with 2 different colors, one in brown and one in green. The brown map is a heat map that tells you the levels of COVID-19 cases, not COPD, COVID-19 cases. So the darker the shade, the more number of COVID cases in that area. And when you look at the level of air pollution, that was noticed in the last 6 months in that area, it perfectly mirrors each other. If you were living in a polluted area, the risk of you having a infection is significantly high as compared to if you're living in a less polluted area. So more air pollution, the greater risk of having COVID infection. Now, it's easy to talk about the harmful effects of air pollution. It's more difficult to talk about what are the solutions that we can do. And I thought I'll just put a few slides on how to mitigate the effects of air pollution and its effects on health. The first thing that we need to really do is change our mindset. This is a very nice slide that talks about the accountability ladder. And most of us are on the below this horizontal line over here. our accountability ladder. I did not know that air pollution was so bad. Oh, one mosquito coil is 100 cigarettes. Really, I did not know that. One dhoop stick is 500 cigarettes. Oh, I did not know that. That's right at the bottom of the ladder. And then the second step is you blame others. It's all because of you that we're getting such high levels of air pollution. It's the industries, it's the motor vehicles. Everybody else is responsible but yourself. The third step is excuses. I can't do anything about it. क्या कर सकता हूँ मैं? I mean, I can't control the air pollution coming from motor vehicles or industries and all that. And then the fourth one is wait and hope. कुछ तो भी हो जाएगा. Maybe somebody like Parisar would do something about it and wait and watch. We need to change our mindset completely. What is the first step towards that? Acknowledge reality. We know that air pollution is there. We know that air pollution is bad. We know that air pollution is causing us harm. So acknowledge it, own it, find solutions and make those solutions happen. It is only when we start climbing those top 4 steps that we will be able to do something about the harmful effects of air pollution on our health. Just wanted to share some interesting thoughts over here. Girls wear these dupattas when they're driving the scooter with the hope that this protects them from the air pollution. Sadly, it doesn't protect them at all. In fact, all the pollutants easily pass through the dupatta, so it offers no protection. If you're wearing a surgical mask, it offers more protection, about 30 to 40%. So surgical mask that we get now in the stores and which have become so common because of the COVID pandemic, they also protect you from air pollution about 30 to 40% of the times. But then these are the bigger masks, or what we call as the N95 masks and the other masks that we should start thinking about, because the pollution levels are so bad outside that if you want to protect your lungs and your other organs of the body from air pollution, you need to wear some of these masks. And go to Amazon website and you'll find all varieties of masks. There are designer masks also available nowadays. What about the indoor air purifiers? Do they really work? They work in places where the pollution levels are very high. So if you're living in Delhi, I would certainly suggest you to buy an air purifier, because the PM 2.5 levels in the ambient air are around 1000 micrograms per cubic meter during those pollution days. Something that you just cannot breathe at all. So at least if you can bring it down from 1000 to say 200, that is good enough. 200 is also bad. Actually, you need to bring it down to 50, but you will never breathe that clean 50 units of PM 2.5 air. So at least this will reduce the levels of pollution significantly. The other thing that really works is planting trees. Very interesting. The plants take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. The lungs take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. The plants take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. Perfectly made for each other. The lungs and the trees and the plants, they're made for each other. They release gases that are important for the other. Not only that, but plants are excellent at absorbing air pollutants. This is work done at the NASA in the United States, the space pollution, the Space Research Station, and they were working on different types of indoor plants that reduce the levels of indoor air pollution. And some of these are scoring extremely high, 9 out of 10, for their ability to absorb air pollutants. So you have the spider plant over here, which is excellent at absorbing carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. Then you have the mother-in-law's tongue, very good for all varieties of air pollution. Then you have the Boston fern, you have the rubber plant, you have the money plant. And some of the flowering plants are also good at absorbing air pollution. Dr. C.R. Babu, who is an ecologist based at the University of Delhi, he did a lot of research to understand which plants should we grow outdoors so that they can absorb air pollutants. And these are some of the plants that he recommends as very good at reducing air pollution. So the peepal tree, the saptaparni tree, the jamun tree, the deodar tree, and the champa. He recommends that all these are extremely good in reducing ambient air pollution. I went and visited the botanist at Ferguson College, who is retired now, very, very famous lady. And she took me to all the parts of Pune city, and she showed me all the trees that are very good at reducing ambient air pollution. And these are some of them. The neem trees, the gulmohar, which is my favorite tree, looks beautiful, but also absorbs a lot of air pollutants. then you have the rubber plant, then you have the April Fool tree, and then you have some of the other plants that are also very good at absorbing ambient air pollutants. So I'm going to stop over here. I wanted to cover the harmful effects of air pollution on health and also suggest some solutions for that. So with this, I'll stop over here. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. And I would now like to pass on to Shweta for the subsequent talks. Shweta, over to you.
Thank you, sir, for that very, very interesting talk. And I think picking from your presentation, at least because of the facts that you have provided, we've at least moved from the last step of the ladder, which is we didn't know. Let's skip the 2-3 steps there, which is blaming others and whatnot. And let's get to acknowledging the reality that air quality is a very important thing and getting on to how we can make it better. So we do have questions for you because we had said that people should type in whenever they think of it, but we'll be taking questions later after Dr. Ritu's presentation. So like Sharmila also mentioned in the beginning, people tend to be interested in issues and are more likely to participate in them if they're aware of the issue in the first place. This brings us to the second part of this webinar, which is about the communication of air quality and more specifically about the health risk communication. We will touch upon the fact that though we have enough data on air pollution, there are even plans and policy documents. Why is that not being translated into action or to reduce the air pollution? What can be done to address the issue of air pollution? Our next speaker will elaborate more on this. Dr. Ritu Parsure works as a senior researcher with the health group of Prayas, a Pune-based NGO. She's trained in medicine and public health. She has worked on a number of issues, health issues such as HIV, AIDS, sexual and reproductive health, health impacts of household air pollution, and COVID-19. Her work focus has been epidemiological and social behavioral aspects of these health issues and related public health responses. With this very short introduction, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Ritu.
Thank you, Shweta, for that kind introduction. And before starting with my presentation, let me first thank Parisa for arranging this webinar on a very pertinent topic at a very pertinent time point, I would say. And also will thank Dr. Sarve for giving this very comprehensive overview, and you explained it so well, sir. What I would be doing is basically taking this discussion forward because knowing this scientific information is one thing and taking actions about it is another. And at times it happens that we do get bogged down by a lot of health information about the health risks because especially if it is about air pollution, and if we start thinking about the death and diseases with every breath that we take, life will be difficult. And I think life has already become a little more difficult with this COVID pandemic going on. And that is definitely not the intention of this webinar. So taking this discussion about the scientific information forward, I would be mainly focusing about how do we translate this knowledge into actions. So let me share my screen and just confirm if you can share my presentation, see my presentation.
Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
Yeah, but I can't scroll my slides. Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay, so We did hear from Dr. Salve about the various health impacts of air pollution. And as we can sum it up, the health ailments, they range from very minor things like sore throat to quite life-threatening consequences like having a heart attack or having a stroke. And many of these health impacts are chronic in nature. And they're all, what is more important to understand is that many of these health impacts, they manifest after a very long time gap. So it is very difficult for people to understand the severity of air pollution as a health risk factor. So people maybe they're likely to relate it to difficulty in breathing or sore throat, as Sharmila just mentioned about a survey right in the beginning. But awareness about the other health impacts, which are more serious health impacts, is likely to be quite low. And so, as we have already discussed, the first thing that we must do is get ourselves, we improve the awareness about all these health risk conditions. But the more important question here is whether this improved awareness will really improve the compliance with the protective and preventive actions, and some of these actions I think Dr. Salve has already mentioned. This is a very important premise that I want to start my discussion about. So knowing about the health risk is necessary, but it's not a sufficient factor for shaping the appropriate responses. And Dr. Salve already talked about this accountability ladder. And in this ability, I think what is important is our abilities to interpret the information, to apply it to a specific context, and to take protective and preventive actions, which are important actions given the context that we are talking about. And I think here, the health risk communication, how do we communicate, how do we talk about these health risks, gain a lot of importance. I want to, before I start talking about the health risk communications, especially in the context of the air pollution, I want to go back a little in and maybe draw parallels from the recent past, just to see or just to reflect on how we have responded to this health information so far. If we revisit the past, we would know most of the diseases, health communication has been based on, and how responded to this threatening information. So if we go a little back, HIV times 10 or 15 years back, when there was no medicine on HIV, and the health communication largely focused upon these fear appeals, it was realized that inducing fear, it led to delayed testing of HIV, and actually it did not improve the condom use, and it did not facilitate learning about HIV. And the same thing is being repeated 20 years after in COVID times, where there is a lot of fear in air about COVID, and you can see extreme reactions people are giving. So these reactions at one end are of the overprotections. Some people, if possible, they would like to wear that PPE, which is nothing less than the space suit, and maybe step out of the house. Sanitization drives all over, we are seeing all around us. And these are nothing but these overprotective extreme reactions we are giving to the fear. And at other end, we are also seeing these extreme reactions in the form of denial and apathy. When we hear about these fear appeals, when we hear about these risks, health risks, there is a lot of uncertainty about the health risks. And then people start making mental models about this risk assessment. And many a times because of these mental models, the judgments go wrong. And I'm trying to give some examples here from, again, these three different health issues: HIV, COVID, and head injury. Head injury is probably the most common thing all of us have experienced. experience. So we all know that helmet is going to protect us from the accidents and not from the accidents, but from the head injury. And we should be wearing helmets all the time. But the decision about wearing the helmet we take based on these mental models, and this is the most common excuse that is seen, that it's my daily routine, just a matter of kilometer or so. So why use helmet when there is hardly any risk of accident? Similarly, at Prayas, we did a qualitative study to understand how people are making judgments about the risk of COVID. And the second quote that you see is about this risk assessment of the COVID. So this is a guy who was detected COVID positive, and we were talking to him about his perceptions about the risk. And the quote says this: "We never felt the need to maintain 6 feet physical distance between friends. We used to roam only for half an hour. I knew all of them, so there was no tension about the COVID." So here, what people are doing is applying this familiarity to assess the risk of the COVID, which and where I think the decisions about the protection are going wrong. The third quote is again from our study, which was done at Prayas, about HIV and how people make judgments about their risk of getting